Thank you, members. We'll go into item 9, which is the Community Transport Fund. And we have Amantha presenting. Welcome, Amantha. Yep, just the red one, yep, or the button on your right.
Right, got it. Kia ora, thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Amantha Bowen. I am the Community Transport Lead. My work is supporting community transport providers, helping to identify ways that we can support them to keep doing the great things that they are doing and keeping their communities connected. I'm somewhat new to this role, but I have been with our transport team for 5 years, working with alternative transport solutions for passengers with disabilities. And online, I'd like to thank my colleague, Sarah Gibb. She works at Community Waikato and has been one of our strongest advocates alongside others like the New Zealand Health Authorities, building a network of support for community transport providers. So if there are any questions between us, we can take them. You may well already know what community transport is, but it denotes a service that is existing because there aren't enough or sometimes any transport solutions in an area, and people need those options to get where they need to go. It's communities serving communities, which is so essential to these areas, and often it means that they can identify the needs of their communities better than the rest of us can. That looks like volunteers organizing rosters and vehicles and getting people to actually drive them to health appointments, wherever that might be, or other needs like getting to the grocery store, getting to a social visit at a cafe. Just helping to eliminate some of that isolation that a lack of transport can mean. These services don't charge a fare. They are run by volunteers and they'll accept a koha. But that means that they often have shortfalls. So they'll apply for grants, they'll receive koha, and they'll also do some fundraising. It can be a real struggle, though, to still meet their needs. And so our fund will make a big difference to those groups. In our RLTP, we acknowledge that transport difficulties are faced by these rural communities, and we committed to providing some support. So that included this $200K per annum grant, which we'll distribute to eligible providers. And that fund first became available this year. So we have spent some time engaging with the sector to ensure that we have a solid understanding of what their need is when we build the framework for the distribution of the funds in order to best support them. And we know of over 30 groups in the Waikato that are going to need this funding. So that 200K wouldn't distribute very far across them. We have therefore suggested a $10,000 cap per group. It will help, but it's definitely not going to fully fund these groups, nor would we necessarily expect to. But just for context, some of these groups cost, or their running costs are $50,000 to $80,000, or sometimes in excess of that. And when they can anticipate a certain level of ongoing need, but sometimes there are unexpected things that come up, such as recent weather events, which caused roads to be closed down. It created these long detours. There's a big shortfall then of what each cost per trip is going to be. And so these groups end up scrambling to try to meet that extra funding need, because in many cases they can't expect that from their passengers. It also puts a strain on drivers who have to drive much longer distances and are sometimes much more tired by the time they, say, get to Hamilton from all the way up Coromandel. So yes, there's standard methods of getting funding, sometimes leave them unsupported in the case of things that come up like this, but our fund will help to some degree. To give a little bit of relief towards that. And we think that once endorsed, we should be able to receive applications for this first year of funding within the next 2 months. We would then take some time to do learnings about how this first distribution went, maybe refine the framework a little bit and then be ready to take another round of applications for the 2023-2024 year. And also, obviously, we would continue to, we would provide monitoring reports to committee so that you guys are aware of how this is going, and if there's potential need for looking at maybe an increase to what that fund looks like, as some councillors have already queried. Thank you, Chair, if there are any questions.
Thank you, Amantha. Any questions for Amantha or her colleague? Yep, Mayor Lim.
Thank you, Amantha. So you mentioned, and this is very relevant to us, the driving distance between Waikato and Coromandel. This has been raised by some of our community people that work the health shuttles, and obviously with the road closures, longer distances, it's been raised as a real concern. Now, for me personally, it's been raised on the fringes and I'm not directly involved in that. Have you had any contact with our Thames or Coromandel or Whitianga people on this subject specifically?
Absolutely, yes. There was definitely a bit of an outcry, a need for support, especially in the first few days and weeks after recent cyclone impacts. Groups looking for a way to meet that newfound demand of they're having to go great distances to get to get where they normally would have gone, to get people to health appointments that are so critical. We all know that a lot of communities have been cut off from us, and an increase in difficulty for them to find their way through. So yeah, that's been a huge impact. And to be honest, we at council obviously weren't prepared to fund that yet because we were still in development of what this framework would look like and how this funding is going to be distributed. So we, Sarah at Community Waikato has actually done a great deal to help them find some alternative funding. That is incredibly tricky, as you can imagine. Not a lot of emergency funding or unclaimed funding exists out there for situations like this.
Thank you. Hi, Sarah. Long time.
Kia ora, Lynn. Hello.
Nice to see you again. So I'm through the chair, if I may, just follow up. So where are you at with that at the moment? Are there still gaps? And the reason I'm asking is because we might be able to access funds through our Mineral Relief Fund to fill some of those gaps in the immediate short term. The criteria around that, I might have to look at that to make sure that we can fill those gaps, but it's kind of what it's for. And we do have, I think at the moment, we've got sufficient funds in there to make sure that we are there to support community groups that are stuck in the middle. Can you just give me an idea of the time frame in terms of the funding support that you're putting through here? What you said, a couple of months, 2 or 3 months?
Yeah, so I expect that we'll start taking applications if all goes to plan with today's meeting and everyone's happy with the framework that we've set up, then we'll start taking applications within the next month, probably distribute the following month, and have everything fully distributed before June. But yet you're correct that wouldn't necessarily be fast enough to help some of these groups. And I think this is something I didn't explicitly say yet, but when these groups, because they're so inherently fragile, when they experience a newfound difficulty, it has the power to sink them. So it's really important that we can that we tackle these things as soon as we can. And I appreciate you recommending this potential fund. I think Sarah also wanted to say something. Am I wrong?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm sorry that you seem to have my full face on your large screens. Lynn, just in response, you have an amazing community. So we have with Tairua and Whitianga in particular, along with Te Whata Ora, and in discussion with the different providers that you have on the coast, so that the providers are looking to work together. So it may be there's a bit of a chain reaction where some people are driven to one community, swapped to another provider, etc. I have spoken to your Mitch King about the use of that mayoral fund. So thank you for raising that again. The main thing we're looking at the moment is what the level of need is. Are we talking about a couple of people that should be flown from Pawanui Airport to meet their needs, or in fact, does it need to be something more? And so this is an opportunity for me to really say that this fund that you're enabling here has created even more strength around connections and groups recognising that by working together more, they can achieve more, and that this funding, because it's untagged, it can be matched with others, all that kind of thing. I think it demonstrates really that with resilience, those communities will work together, and they're just going to make it happen, which is, I think, fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. So Mitch King was the right guy. I'm not involved in the details, but it's really good to hear that those options are being explored. If I can help in any way, and if we can close the gap, and because we can work, I think, quite a lot faster. That Mayoral Relief Fund has closed last Friday, but we're going to be looking at opening it up again. So we do have some flexibility in that. So don't hesitate to reach out if we can help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Amantha or Sarah? Sorry, Angela.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to be in your blind spot. Yeah, thank you, Amantha and Sarah, for all your work. Sarah, I recall when you came to speak to us at long-term plan time, and you highlighted the needs throughout our whole region. So thank you, and you and Greg, for doing that. Yeah, this fund is so vitally important, as we've just heard, and that's part of the reason why we established it. Just a couple of questions, Amantha. Moving forward, you mentioned you had 30 groups approximately in need of probably the maximum cap per group. So that 200,000 isn't going to go far. What data are you collecting so we can understand more fully the needs of the whole region in this area?
Thank you for your question. So we have engaged with the community to first and foremost kind of get a sense for what wouldn't be too onerous to get from them, because again, the last thing we want is to put extra pressure on these groups. But it seems that we should be able to access patronage data as well as volunteer hours, their operational costs, probably some idea of how much they get from Koha and how much that supports. So I think we should be able to put together a pretty solid picture of not only how well they've been operating and serving their community, but also what sort of impact the funding that we were able to give creates.
Cool. And so that data will then inform our long-term plan moving forward, or that won't be ready in time for long-term plan? Mark?
It's through you, Chair. We are really keen to do two things with the data. One is to inform what the future requirements of such a fund might be, which would go through long-term plan, but also to inform whether, in light of demand for funding, to inform how the fund might be targeted. Is there potential for the fund to be better targeted to the groups that need it? So the policy as it's designed at the moment is deliberately flexible, because it is, as we know, the best way to learn about something is to give it a go and see what information we collect. So that's really part of the first tranche intention here. So we'll learn two things. One is what the long-term, medium-term fund requirements are. Some data that we'll be able to build off a long-term plan. So based on the timing of the proposed funding round, we should have that data accessible for long-term plan 2024, but also potentially future iterations of the policy if it needs refinement.
Thank you, Mark. And Chair, if I may, just one further question. As our funding this year is limited, moving forward, is there opportunity to partner with others such as Te Whata Ora?
I hope so. And this is something that Sarah, myself, and some other stakeholders, stakeholder groups are looking at. We are interested in seeing if there's an opportunity through Waka, Kotahi and Ministry of Transport, and through some of the work that the health authorities are doing as they revise what localities look like there. I envision it could be something like them joining funding towards our pool, and then we would have, a bit further to distribute out. I think that would be wonderful. And it's something that we're actively in talks about.
Thank you, Amantha. Chair, I'm happy to move the report when the time comes. Thank you.
Yep, okay. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies, for presenting your report. I fully support this. In our region, we're going through a growth phase with the older generation. And it's absolutely, there is a need for this. The data is going to be really important, how we establish that need. The question I had was around, would this be a use it or lose it fund? Or would it be, if the fund isn't utilised, which I anticipate it would be, would that amount be carried forward?
My understanding is that it is a use it or lose it fund. I think that might have to do with the fact that it's funded through the general rate. Yes.
Any other questions for Amantha or Sarah? Okay, we've got two resolutions here. We've got the first that the Community Transport Framework report be received, and also that proposed framework and the application process set out in the Community Transport Grant Fund policy document be endorsed. We have that moved by Councillor Strange. Can I have a seconder, please? Yep, second by Kevin. All those in favour? Those against? Carried.
Thank you.
Okay, on to item number 10. Very well, welcome, David, and anticipating from all everyone here, your report.
So we'll take the report as read, Mr. Chair, and I've got this presentation which essentially steps us through the report. Some bits of it I'll skip through pretty quickly, and what we might dwell on a little bit more are the funding and the strategic priority issues, and then the local update, because I know lots of people have got questions around local issues. So first, next slide, next slide. NLTP activity classes. So this might help with the question earlier that Claire raised about how are we performing. This is a national view, but to be honest, it's consistent across most of the regions, with the exception of the South Island, where things have gone really, really well this summer. They've had the best summer ever. So you'll recall, as we came into this summer, our minister announced the fact that this year was going to be our biggest year of maintenance on the network ever. We got a really big injection of funding into that maintenance program, and you can see that in the really big tower in the middle of the graph. As you might imagine, this hasn't been our biggest summer of maintenance ever for obvious reasons. And so as we came towards the end of the year, the board, Waka Kotahi board, asked for advice about what they should do with the funding that had been allocated to the activity classes. For those members that are new, our funding gets allocated into those activity classes that are up there on the presentation. And in essence, once they are set, they are set. We don't dip into one to fund the other, unless we go back to the board and ask for a reprioritisation. And that's exactly what we did at the end of the year. We got a very constrained funding environment. We realised that both ourselves and local government, our road controlling authority partners, were not going to meet expectations in terms of funding of local road maintenance, of some of the public transport infrastructure funding. And so we went back to the board and we said, we think a reallocation makes sense. We also have the not so small issue of around about a $600 million shortfall in expected revenue. And again, that's driven mostly by COVID. So we're still seeing the sort of tail end of that. So the board chose to make these reprioritizations, and what you can see there on the graph is the little red lines and the blue boxes. Those are, so the light blue colour is where we expected to invest in each of the activity classes. The red line is the revised target, and the blue box is sort of the range that we expect to achieve in there. What you'll notice in Angus's favour is rail didn't change because rail are delivering. And long may they do so, because the more freight we can get off the roads, the better for the roads and the better for our emissions targets, quite frankly. So look, the winners and losers there really are quite a bit more investment in public transport services and a reduction in public transport infrastructure. And that's really just a reflection of the fact that we've all been scrambling around fixing roads instead of building new infrastructure. The rest really speak for themselves. But that, apart, as I say, apart from the South Island, that trend is pretty much consistent, clear across every region. And when Nigel gets us the detailed data at the next workshop, it will reflect this very much so in the Waikato region. The Bay of Plenty is almost identical in terms of that reprioritisation. This doesn't include the impact of the recent weather events. And so as we roll towards the latter part of this NLTP, what I'm signalling here, I guess, is we will not have any room to fund new projects. So essentially, if it's not in the NLTP as committed or probable, it almost certainly won't get funded. Those of you that were here for the last round, you'll know there's committed, probable, and possible, and the possibles are the ones we'd really like to fit them in. They are a high priority, but we might not be able to. Almost certainly we won't be able to this round. What that means is we expect there to be quite a lot of carryover into the next NLTP, and that's the thing we're going to have to grapple with in the regional transport plan preparation. It's how much of what we didn't deliver do we want to carry over, and having a realistic conversation about the expectations of emissions reduction, of those things. Are some of them still relevant? And I think that's a really important conversation for us to have. But just signalling now, we will have quite a bit of carryover into the NLTP and RLTP, potentially. We will have constrained funding going forward because there's a many tens of billions of dollar hole in the network at the moment. So almost certainly that we will have some very constrained funding environment. Next slide. Thinking about that process, the indicative strategic priorities for GPS 24. The Minister has signalled a slowdown in terms of delivery of that. We will now be looking at April, May for delivery of a full draft of the GPS. What the Minister hasn't signalled is that any of those priorities are going to change. So with an overarching focus on emissions reduction, 5 priorities being integrated freight system, really important, and that's about making sure that we are moving freight around in the most efficient and effective way. And again, Angus's presentation is very timely in the context of that. Safety, so a transport system where no one is killed or seriously injured, and that's where your Road to Zero programs and our safety improvement programs, medium barriers, etc., all come in. Resilience, and that's going to be a really big conversation for us, and all of our expectations are that will float to the top. Now, we don't know that yet. I'm just signalling at the moment our expectation is that's going to float to the top. How we make a resilient network in a country where the geology changes every 2 kilometres, where it's steep, it's erodible, and we have metres of rainfall every year, that's a really big question for us to ask. But no question, the connection between local road networks and the state highway will never be more important than it is in this resilience conversation. And that's played out in the Coromandel. You've seen that I-25 closes. What's our alternative? It's Tapu Kora Glen, or it's 309. Enough said. State Highway 35 closes. State Highway 2 closes. What's our alternative? Actually, there is none. Again, enough said. There's some really hard conversations we need to have, and some investment conversations around what do alternative routes look like. Because frankly, we are not going to be able to build a network of 4-lane highways that are bulletproof. We simply don't have the money in this country, and nor do we have, nor is it practical. So that resilience conversation is going to be more about what does it look like when things go wrong? How do we adjust? How do we adapt? Where can we move out of the way and build in better places? Because some of these roads were built back in the 40s and 50s, post-war, 1967 with a bulldozer, because that was the easiest place to go. So we do need to have a little bit of that conversation as well. And obviously sustainable urban development, that's continues to be a significant investment strategy, and maintaining and operating the system. And again, moment, that's proving to be a pretty big challenge for us. Mr. Chair, if there are questions as I go, up to you. I can take them, or we can hold them all at the end.
No, clear?
Yes, thanks, David. One of the questions as a newbie was the previous slide that shows your investment in the activity classes. That's on a national level, isn't it?
That's on a national level.
Yeah, so is there any benefit in having a regional, graph? Because that in a way would give
So we do have a regional version of
right.
this graph, and that's what Nigel's talking about.
Oh.
He'll bring to that next meeting.
Right.
I guess what I'm signaling is it doesn't look that much different, to be honest.
Yeah, and I don't know whether or not it's worthwhile for us to have that on a regular basis. Yeah, I guess that's all.
Yeah, it might be more appropriate that actually that's in the, where's he gone? In Nigel's report.
Yeah, there he is.
Than in mine, because probably that's a bigger overview of the investment across the whole RLTP, not just in Waka Kotahi. So how you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it would only be useful. It would only be useful if this committee could actually see that there's, you're not able to deliver in one area and we have a priority in another area or something, but you've said you've got to take that back to the board anyway. So I don't know, but just getting the best performance out of the funding. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a routine. I mean, that's part of our routine reporting to the board, is how are we going on this sort of stuff. So we can certainly provide our context for that. But as I say, there's a wider context for that. Nigel, when I used to work here, there was a thing called a golden slip. I don't know if it's still here, but you just got it.
I do have another question too about this slide, because you mentioned that you're likely to see movement in the different contributors to the overarching focus. So what would be useful for this committee is to know the levers or the impact on the different settings on those five key themes. And I'm interested in the rail because, if we could actually focus more on getting those freight connections onto rail, what bigger difference would that make? And with sustainable urban development, because that's happening in our urban centres mostly, are we getting a really big impact there? And so is that where we should be focusing our efforts, to get those results that we're wanting to, so that kind of thing. I don't know if you've ever got those kind of.
You mean in terms of emissions reduction?
Well, not necessarily, because I do know, I'm familiar with the Strong Towns movement that did a financial analysis of the different ways that urban centres are configured, and it shows, different forms actually produce a lot bigger benefits. Yeah, and so I'm as a newbie, I don't know whether or not you've done any of that work, not so much Waka Kotahi, but generally as well, because that would be really helpful for the committee as well.
So quite a bit of that work is exactly what has been done over the last few years in smart growth and in Tauranga smart growth and future proof, for the two growth strategies in my region anyway, on either side of the hill. That's exactly the focus. So the Metro Spatial Plan, the Urban Form and Transport Initiative in Tauranga, those are very much about what is the most efficient way that we can develop our urban centres and peri-urban centres, and how are they sympathetic to the needs of those widest, the reason that, for example, Manamata-Piako District Council and Waikato District Council and Waipa are so important in smart growth is because Hamilton City doesn't function independently of those. So that conversation has happened. It is what is driving those investment decisions now. Nobody's whispering in my back of my head saying, "No, But that is very much about, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, how do you make a 20-minute city work? How do you make sure that you can commute from Cambridge into Hamilton without having to bring your car? Those conversations are absolutely part of those growth strategies. In terms of the impact of the relative investment priorities, that's being worked through at the moment. So Ministry of Transport do this with our input, with KiwiRail's input, with a whole bunch of other people's input. They will be coming out and consulting wider with all of our road controlling authorities as well. But yeah, the minister signalled that, given in light of recent events, he just wants to buy himself another month. Now the problem with that is, the more months we buy, the closer we get to having to produce an LTP and LTPs. So make haste. Next slide.
Just sorry, Kevin's got a question.
Really quickly, David, you mentioned you rolled over some of the projects from the current budget, and that's a process we've just been through. Will do, should do, could do, but won't anymore.
Yeah.
How much of that is constrained by the industry's ability to deliver, and what's the impact of that likely to be, given all of the rebuilds we've got?
So that's the bit I said we haven't dealt with yet. So this was pre the big event that we've had. At the moment, we're coping okay in terms of delivery, and so we're not walking away from fixing the maintenance programs that we had. In fact, we're pushing ahead in many places where we can. How much can the industry cope with? It's a really good question. We literally had this conversation, with the Prime Minister last week and with the Minister previously, who's also the Minister of Immigration, about, we do have a skills shortage, we do have a capacity shortage. It'll be tight. It's going to be really constrained.
Yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, it impacts on decisions we make here and what we would like to do, whatever it might be aspirational. Absolutely. Or just we really need this regardless. But if we decide we need to do X, put delivery capability max out as Y, we're wasting our time, really, aren't we?
Yep. Yes, in terms of immediate delivery, but one of the things, and we'll touch on this a little bit in a minute, is in the RLTP. So the NLTP, National Land Transport Plan, and NLTF, National Land Transport Fund, are not the only game in town in terms of funding these projects. And Angus touched on it before. There are other funding sources that government will choose to use to fund large-scale projects. There are other funding sources that government will use to fund emissions reduction projects if they choose to do so. So I guess my plea when we are doing our thinking around NLTPs and RLTPs and all the other TPs is, if it ain't on the list, it ain't going to get funded. If it is on the list and it doesn't get funded this time, well, it might next time, or it might when there's a new fund that pops up. But it won't get funded if it isn't on the list, and isn't on the list in a way that describes rationally why it's there. Yeah, I think that's really important. Okay, so this is an easy one. Just to let you know, there used to be safe system audit guidelines apply to every project that is funded in the National Land Transport Program. You have to be able to apply the safe system audit guidelines, and that's essentially goes back to that priority about making sure that we have a safe system. There used to be two different assessment guidelines. There used to be two different parallel systems. It was confusing. It was hard to use. They've been amalgamated and updated. Your key staff have all been over this. They have been briefed on this lots of times, and there are some virtual training courses how to use the guidelines on our website. But our investment team are also, our investment advisor team are also there to help your teams when you are doing this. So if there are any questions, our investment advisors are there. They can pick up the phone. They all know each other already. Don't worry, and get some guidance on how to use these. They're actually, I had a look and I could understand it. So that tells you, the real experts won't have any problems with it at all. It is much better apparently than what it was. But just letting you know that's been upgraded. Next slide. The other thing that's been upgraded, vehicle safety ratings. So up until now, one of the things about vehicle safety ratings is they haven't featured the safety features in imported vehicles. And so now they do. So all the flash, when you're following, it'll brake for you and do all those kind of things. They're all in the new updated vehicle safety rating. So if you've got a 5-star rated car at the moment, you'll probably find it's a 4-star rated car in there now. And you know, that's fair. It moves as technology improves. Once upon a time, my old car, unfortunately, it's not as old as you were intimating before, Angus, but I think it's now a 3-star rated car, and I'm waiting for it to become a 2-star rated car within the next couple of years. But it's worth a look, particularly if, like me, you've got teenagers who want a car and would quite like a 1970s Hilux, please, Dad. It's definitely worth having a look. And you know, just one of the things, you are twice as likely to survive a crash, twice as likely in a 5-star rated car as you are in a 2-star rated car. In a head-on collision, you are twice as likely to survive. So, you know, it's worth that. It's worth having a look and making that investment. And that's because of all the crash avoidance features and the crumple zones and all that. But yeah, worth knowing that that's there for your insurance, etc. Next slide. I know there'll be questions about this. I know Claire has already sent us through one, which was very handy having it beforehand. So VKT reduction planning. So that is going ahead at a great rate at the moment. The VKT program is led by the Ministry of Transport, not by Waka Kotahi, but we are working for them in that context, if you like. We're coordinating the workshops with all of the tier 1 and tier 2 cities and districts, etc. We're coordinating the funding planning, and we are doing the distribution of the SURF funding, for example, to help bring, you know, plans. So we're sort of the coordinators. They are leading, and they're making the policy decisions around vehicle kilometres travelled. Now, Claire posed a question about the assumptions around tier 1 and tier 2, and the fact that Waipa was allocated as a tier 1. And I wrote some notes down, so I'm going to go back to those. So the National Policy Statement Urban Development actually defines Waipa as tier 1 city, and it defines Waipa as tier 1 and Waikato because of your association with Hamilton and the fact that you've got shared transport systems with Hamilton. So the collective of Hamilton, Waipa and Waikato make you all a tier 1. Hamilton on its own probably wouldn't be a tier 1. Yeah, it's that close. And Tauranga is the same. Tauranga on its own is not a tier 1, but Tauranga with Western Bay District becomes a tier 1. So you're both kind of in the same situation. So that's why you're a tier 1. It's that shared. What MOT are doing, though, is they're recognising the fact that for those entities that aren't Wellington, Christchurch, Auckland, stand alone, thanks very much, we'll do our own thing. They are going to go through a process, and they've started it, working on regional targets. So they will work through, and they've had one meeting on the 23rd of February with about 140 people from across the country, from all of your planning groups. There's another one on the 21st of March, and then there's another 2 in April to work through what does that mean, what targets look appropriate, and how do we meet those targets? Because the tier 1 target is a 20% reduction by 2030. It's not insubstantial. Well, it's huge. It's incredibly aspirational, particularly as you grow as well. So that's the explanation of why you're a tier 1, and also the approach. So they're not going to go, Waipa, you need to achieve 20%, Hamilton. They're going to go, in a regional context, how do we work with you to try and achieve that 20%? And that is going to really, really inform the RLTP conversation. It's going to have to, significantly. Now, at the moment, we got, Ministry of Transport gave us $22 million, $22.5 million to get the National VKT reduction plan and programs in place and look at rough design, project design. What would you do here? What would you do there? The expectation is that those programs will then be funded through the NLTP process. So again, that's why it's going to be really important we get that in the RLTP. So hopefully that was a fulsome answer. There's your timing in terms of key milestones. And again, they're really tight, but really important. So that sub-national target, and that will flow down to a regional target, which will be Waipa, Waikato. Okay. All right. And just for the rest of you, if you can give me, if you've got a question from our report, if you fire it through to me, even if it's the day before, I think I got this one on Thursday or something, I can ring the guys in MOT or, and say, or whoever, and get you a really good answer instead of David's off the cuff answer. Please do. I mean, sometimes my off the cuff answers are pretty good, but yeah, you're going 50-50. Next slide. Just another update because you are one of the parties in this national ticketing solution. So this has been work in progress for a really long time. The major partners, Auckland Transport, Greater Wellington, Regional Council, ECAN, Waka, Kotahi, and then there's a regional consortium of the 10, what I've called medium and smaller councils, which includes Waikato, are funding this national ticketing solution. It's going to be rolled out in a staged process because it's just too big to implement in one hit, starting with Canterbury, and then all the other regions. So starting with Canterbury in 2024, all the other regions should be in place by 2026. And what that means is that you will be able to use contactless payment using your credit card, debit or credit cards, digital payments, Apple iPay, et cetera, all off one system. It means we can report nationally, we can report regionally, we can report locally, all consistent reporting. It will include Te Huia. And it just is so much more efficient and effective in terms of our ability to not only report, but plan public transport investment based on demand and changes in demand, which we can't do very easily at the moment. There's heaps more information on the website if you're interested, but yeah, I mean, if you've got questions, feel free to fire them through to me and I can. As we get closer to implementation, once ECAN is in place, what we might do is we might get the ticketing solution team to actually come and talk to all the regional transport committees and just say, hey, this is how it's going, or not. Next slide. Last national thing, driver licensing improvement. I've talked to you about this before. We've had it loud and clear that driver's licensing is a real issue nationally. Access to a driver's license is like a ticket to a whole lot of really important social and economic needs, particularly for small communities. A lot of people, that's their one form of ID, for example. They don't have a passport. A lot of people, that's their only way to get a job because I need a driver's license to get the ute to go to the dairy farm or to go to town for my job or whatever. A lot of families, it's the ticket to parents being able to move their children around safely. Police tell us frequently that one of the first interactions young people have in rural areas, particularly with police, is driving without a license. Why are you driving without a license? Well, we've only got one car. Driver's licensing is Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We live rurally. Mum and Dad both work. I can't get there. How am I supposed to get a driver's license? So particularly in places like a Kotahi and Northland and, well, actually parts of our region, it's very, very challenging. So with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Social Development and Police, we've developed a really innovative program around community-led licensing in some of those far-flung places. We're working on virtual testing in some of those places. It's still work in progress, but well, one of the things you don't train in an actual airliner when you learn to fly an airliner. You train in a virtual airliner, right? And then one day they let you in the real thing. So we're looking at this quite holistically. We're looking at iwi providers who are very, very keen to do it as a social service rather than at the moment through the providers we have. It's an economic recovery service. They run it as a business. So in those places where the business would not be viable because the demand's too small or the community's too far flung, we're looking at that social provider process. It's working really, really well at the moment in Northland. So we are testing that in February, March at the moment about how would we roll that elsewhere. It's the usual communities as well that are impacted by this. It's the lower socio-economic communities. It's the rural communities. They're the usual suspects in all of these things. So really, really cool program. It's small, it's going slowly, it's deliberately going slowly because we really have to get this right. One thing you don't want to do is start handing out driver's licenses like they came in the Weet-Bix box. So it has to be robust, but it also has to be accessible. So really good work in progress, and I'll just keep throwing that in as an update as things progress in that space.
David, Neil Lynn's got a question, and then Angela.
Thanks, David. Just on, I'd support you 100% on the work on driver's licenses. There is a Thames Community Driver's License Program which works really well, and I have regular meetings with our local police. And interesting comment came back from them the other day that they said, look, there used to be a pattern where taking a driver's license away was a punishment. That was part of the legal process if somebody crossed the line. That's now completely turned around, because by taking a driver's license away, you take away the ability to work. Quite often, and as David said, quite often the first interaction that these young people have with police is because they're caught driving without a license. So the police now are actively getting young people into driver's licenses, or getting them enabled driver's licenses, and it's having a huge beneficial effect with young people in the community. So yeah, I'd support that 100%.
Angela?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic project. Everyone should have access to being independent with their travel. Just a question though. We have discussed it. We did discuss it last term around here, and our council wrote to the minister around the abandonment of once you get your full license, then you never get contacted again, and road code changes. We also wrote on the same letter, we wrote to the minister about a national safety campaign for educating drivers around cycling. We got a response from that, but there are crickets with the abandonment of drivers once they get their full license. So is there going to, what needs to change there? And for the new members, we had quite an interesting discussion about the fact that, someone like me, I sat my license when I was 15. That was a few years ago, and the road code has changed many times. I've never received a letter from the MOT saying, hey, here's a change in the rules. So I guarantee anyone else in my situation gets on the road and we break the rules. We ride on cycle lanes, we do all sorts. I don't know. Any movement, because, Road to Safety Vision Zero, that's what it's all about as well.
So there is some, and part of this program is looking at the wider comms around driver's licensing and changes. If you jump on our website, so the issue at the moment is you have to be proactive. So, but if you jump on our website and have a look, there is actually a really comprehensive list of all the changes and things you should know as a driver, but you have to be proactive about it. So this program is actually looking at how we reverse that and be proactive in terms of that. So yeah, there is some movement on that. But again, it's slow and very deliberate about how you do it. Adult driver education, people ask all the time, why don't we just, it's actually not nearly as effective as getting it right when you get your license. In fact, it's in some cases counterproductive, because what it does is create an overconfident driver. Most of the investment, to be blunt, is going into getting our licensed drivers licensed really well and trained really well, and then being proactive, as you say, as things change. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Eugene.
Yeah,
Sorry.
just thank you through these, Chair. It's just more of a comment, David. When great work around this licensing, driver's licensing, because it is a big issue, and good to see that you've got MOE and placing that on board. You mentioned virtual training or licensing, which could be a great thing, but I just sort of want to don't want to be a negative here, but put a caveat on there. There's that there's been plenty of studies done with violence in our communities, etc., and the young ones not being able to differentiate between online gaming and what happens there to reality. So I'd hate to see the issues there and society transported, like moved over to licensing where kids don't get the difference between sitting in a virtual unit and driving a real car on an open road. So,
and there's a reason why it's going slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the analogy for a jet pilot is probably not a good one, because what you're dealing with a jet pilot is a very, very highly educated adult, as opposed to a child essentially jumping behind the wheel of a missile. So yes, it is going slowly. Okay, I've just got a few slides on regional updates specific to our part of the world. What I don't have in there is State Highway 1B, so I might start with just a quick update on that because that is front and centre for us at the moment. As you all know, you are famous, Len. You are overrepresented in the next few slides. State Highway 1B remains closed at the moment at the Holland Road intersection. Has been closed for quite some time. Angus and myself are meeting with Waikato District and some community representatives tomorrow to talk through the fact that we have now got a final report on what options are there to open State Highway 1B safely. Those options all require quite substantial investment. We have committed to putting one of those options forward in the State Highway Investment Plan in our SHIP for consideration. And yeah, tomorrow we're going to sit down with some of those local representatives. Eugene will be there just to talk them through that and get their feedback. The challenge for us is not one of those options is a quick fix. They are all going to take years. And so there's some challenging conversations to have in that space over the next little while, and some investment that we need to make in the local road network. Local roads keep coming up at the moment to make that and continue to make that fit for purpose while we go through the investment process for better or worse on those options. So just that's literally the update, and I can't give you any more. And I probably, if I could, I wouldn't until we've met with the community groups, because I think that's a really important meeting to inform, how and when we go forward with communicating wider public. So on the picture, summer weather events. It's been the worst summer in I don't know how long, but there's some really, the pictures tell the story. The top left-hand corner, that's Kawhia. So that's about 20 kilometres from the intersection, the State Highway intersection. That underslipped 20 kilometres from the corner of State Highway 39 and 31 at Tihiroa. The site's been on one lane with traffic lights for quite some time. We've done geotech inspections. We have got construction options for repairs. We know what we need to do to fix that site and stabilise it. And we're now just working on resourcing and getting a plan in place to do that. At the moment, it's for the next 20 minutes, it's not in any danger of falling down. No, it is relatively stable. When I say relative to many of the other sites we've got in the country at the moment. But it does absolutely need remediation with some urgency. Underslips are the hard ones. Overslips, you can, there's still a road under there. You can clear it and clear the stuff away from the top. Underslips, the road's gone, and they're the real problem. So the next slide along the top, that's State Highway 23 to Raglan. So that was closed for nearly a month. It wasn't a site that we expected. And this is part of the challenge we've got. It was not a site that we would have expected to go. We reopened it on the 3rd of March. I was out in Raglan that weekend and it was pumping. It was absolutely pumping. It helped that it was a beautiful day and the surf was really good. At the moment, what they've done, and you can see, is pushed, they've actually taken out a lot of trees and pushed a bench out into the far side of that picture to create another lane. It's not a consolidated lane because you can't drive a vibrating compactor on that site with the slip happening on the other side of it. So that's why the caution around heavies and things at the moment, and why it took quite a while to open it to all vehicles. The other issue is that we had a fatality associated with the site, which was absolutely tragic. That site is now under full investigation. New Zealand Police and WorkSafe are working on that, and we're part of the process. Long-term solution for the site, so it's not finished. the long-term solution is actually to bring back that lane and pull the road back to where it was, and that's being developed at the moment. So there's, as you'd appreciate, a fair bit of geotech and planning to do there, because it's a very steep site.
David, sorry, Mr. Chair, just before you move on, just only because you mentioned the road worker that was killed, and that was heartbreaking, because I noticed a week earlier, your Facebook page had said we're getting an uptick in aggressive behaviour from drivers.
Yeah.
And I thought, for you to say that, it must be serious out there, and then that road worker was killed, and we talk about that a lot. In our building and in our meetings, I particularly do, because I'm just sick and tired of drivers speeding and abusing road workers. But just on that, and I know what happened in the past, are you expecting another review of safety protocols, and then that may have a trickle down effect? And
we do that every single time
compliance?
there's an
Okay.
incident, whether it's a
Alright.
fatal or a near miss. We
Yeah.
do that. That's just part of our business as usual.
Yeah.
In this case, we'll wait till the investigation's completed. It wasn't associated with a road rage person, just to be clear. But we have seen an upswing in that, and I don't know whether it's COVID or what, but they're just people seem to feel that they have a right to abuse the poor bugger standing on the side of the road because they're frustrated with having to wait at a slip. And that's the very last person in the chain of decision. They're not even involved in the chain of decision making, and yet they are. We've had things thrown at people. We've had verbal abuse. We've had literally physical threats, and it's not on. It's disgusting behaviour, but there has been an upswing. So much so that where we have sites now with stop go, we can't have one person, so we have to have two. We have to have ready comms. We just cannot trust the public to leave one person at a site with a stop go.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's literally how significant it's gotten. Sad as it is to say that. The next photo, bottom left-hand corner, that is Hikawaitua Portery. So that's another great big underslip, another site that we didn't really expect. The road started to crack following quite a bit of rain. Interestingly, at this site, there was 135 mils of rain in 24 hours. At Pinnacles, which is 8 kilometres as the crow flies, there was 23 millimetres of rain. So this was a heavy, localised rainfall event. The drainage just didn't cope. The Coromandel is saturated already. I've got an amazing graph that we gave the Prime Minister, which shows that current levels of rainfall, if it didn't rain again from now until August the 17th, we will get back to where we should be. So we've had August the 17th's rain by now on the Coromandel. So it's just saturated, and everywhere you go, there is water bleeding out of every cut face. And we have big, heavy trucks. We have cars driving over it, all vibrating, wet soil. Ironically, as it dries out, the drying out might be just as hazardous as the water. And so we're currently monitoring 20 high-risk sites on the Coromandel. And this is one of the things that I think Len is staying awake at night about, is there are 20 sites where we are currently monitoring high-risk slips on the Coromandel, and they're spread across the Coromandel on our network. That's not Len's network, that's just our network. There's well over 50, but those 20 are the high-risk ones that could go at any time. And they could go and close the road again for days, weeks. On the upside, we've had lots and lots of really good aerial survey, lots of on-the-ground survey, lots of geotech survey on all of those sites. We are monitoring them all the time. Doesn't mean they're not going to go, but it does mean that we are, we're able to start, as we start to do the cleanup on these sites, we're able to start moving towards remediating some of those, putting in extra drainage, doing whatever we can to stabilise those sites. It does mean that the Coromandel is going to have more disruption over the course of the year. It's not like we're coming into the dry season. So that's our challenge, and that's the challenge for the businesses on the Coromandel. So I'd encourage you, if you can show some love to the Coromandel, go to a restaurant, go to the wherever, do it, because I know Len hates them, but book the Booker Batch and go and stay the weekend in the Coromandel, because those businesses are really struggling. And interesting, I didn't know this, Len, but that meeting the other day with the tourism industry, 80% of the tourism on the Coromandel is local. It's not international. So, we can help. Last slide. This is the topo end of State Highway 5. At the moment, the road is still closed. There were numerous very large slips along that network, top slips, under slips, you name it, slips, making really, really good progress. Can't give you a time when it will be open, but at the moment, emergency access is possible, but it's walking through, like a person walking in front and a person walking behind a vehicle as it goes through, because the network's so sensitive at the moment and there's cracking and those kind of things. So the next step for us, the next priority is to get those stable enough that we can get freight through, even if it is walking through, so that, even if they have to walk through and it takes them 20 minutes to get through each slip site, it will be faster than the alternative at the moment. So that's our next priority. But, it's pretty significant. Next slide. Next slide's a little video of State Highway 25. You may have seen this on YouTube. If you have, my apologies, but Joe is our manager of infrastructure delivery. This is one of the best explanations I've seen of what's going on there at the moment. It's a huge hole in the ground, unfortunately, but hopefully it'll play. Told it played when you had the demo. There we go. Okay, in this, Joe says it's a really big hole in the ground. We've managed to push an access track up above the slip to get drilling rigs in to try and find something hard to work with. So far they haven't. We've managed to get rigs down the bottom to drill to try and find something hard. So far they haven't. We are clearing the slip face at the moment to get to stable ground and to find where all the water's coming in, so that what we can then do is capture that water and direct it up so that it's not soaking the whole face. The next steps are around deciding we've got three options. One, we go around the slip, either below it or above it. Below it, probably not practical because there's quite a large river and it's quite floodable. Above it, there's some potential, but at the moment we haven't found any hard ground above it. It's basically the geologists were describing to me the other day, and I mean, I've got a geology degree once upon a time, but I was going, really? Okay, so basically what you're saying is it's wet plasticine, and they said that's actually a really good analogy. It's basically sticky, it's soft. When we start playing with it, it gets worse, and it's not draining because it's just holding water. So we've got go around it. We've got fill it back up again and fill it up with engineered earth. Now that's basically injecting, as they fill it, they inject like a plasticized concrete that is slightly flexible into the earth as they build up a big platform and then build your road on top of that. Because gabion walls just not practical. This thing's, meters and meters, tens of meters high. And the last option is bridge it. We've actually started doing some design work on what a bridge might look like for that site at the moment. So those are the three options being looked at. None of those options are fast options. So we, at the moment, are saying 9 to 12 months. It's not good news for Christmas for the Coromandel, unfortunately, but that's our reality at the moment. Is none of those options are a quick fix, nor is putting in an alternative route somewhere So we're sort of stuck with what we've got. What that does do, though, is it swings back to that priority around monitoring those 20 slips on the current network and keeping the current network open and keeping crews there so that we are as responsive as possible when that current network does get closed briefly. So that's, yeah, short of Joe's marvellous presentation, I've done my best.
Well, thank you, Nigel. Very well informed.
I've had a promotion.
Sorry, David. Any questions for David? Yeah, Claire.
Thanks. I've got some questions about the regional update and the specific projects that are underway there. Can we ask you questions about those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By all means.
Well,
Absolutely.
in Waipa, we've got the Pairere roundabout work.
Yes.
And also I've had feedback about the Karapiro Road intersection, or the one where the mobile is and the Karapiro school is. Yeah, because I think that community would like a bit more certainty as to what solution is going to be proposed and when. And just with the roundabout with the Pairere proposal there, just some I suppose more information that the solution's actually going to improve the situation beyond just satisfactory, that it is going to be a good long-term solution. I think some of the locals that use that intersection are worried that it's going to be okay, but it's still actually not going to be delivering those improvements to avoid those really long queues and have confidence that they can negotiate that roundabout in safety. Yeah.
So, okay, so if we start with Stairway 29, Stairway 129 roundabout, there's two things that drive the queues at the moment. One is that intersection, and one is the road between the end of the expressway and the intersection. And they're two different solutions. The intersection will not solve the issues with the road between the end of Cambridge and whatever massive roundabout we build. The roundabout itself, one of the things we've got now is fortunately, we've got really, really good data on what usage looks like on the expressway. So we're pretty confident that out beyond 2040, that roundabout is an excellent solution that will alleviate those problems at the intersection. And the biggest problem at the intersection is the backing up of the traffic, the frustration, and then the dangerous manoeuvres to turn onto it. So absolutely confident that it is the right solution for that. In terms of the bit between the roundabout and the end of the expressway, we now have access to the property that we want to put the expressway, the roundabout on.
Yeah.
We're doing the geotech, we're doing the ecological surveys. Got to put my boots on and go out with the guys doing the ecological and geotech a few weeks ago, and there's some pretty big issues on the designation pathway between the roundabout and the end of the expressway, but there always are with these things you're going through. Again, I come back to it's New Zealand, every kilometre the geology changes. The designation is really broadly in place. At the moment, the next step is confirming that designation. And part of the reason why we're trying to do the ecological and geotech work now along the whole designation is so that if we need to adjust it to go round things or to allow us some land to do mitigation, stormwater mitigation or ecological mitigation, we can make those adjustments before we confirm that designation. That then puts us in the place where we go back to the funding pool and say, dear government, we need X $100 million to build this road. This is what it's going to look like. Put that in the list of large scale infrastructure investments. The roundabout itself, you should see some progress on and in the ground at the end of this year. Karapiro intersection, we are meeting with Karapiro Board of Trustees, Karapiro School Board of Trustees, I think this week. Might be next week. Sorry, it's next week. Because of that exact. So we have a design. We have two designs actually, and what we want to do is start socialising those designs, and they're top of the list because they've been very concerned. Them and the mobile station and the trucking companies, or justifiably, have all got great concerns about that area.
Just following on with the Piriri roundabout, consequence of a collector road goes past your place at Scotsman's Valley. Yep. Just wondering what data there is around people actually going Scotsman's Valley and avoiding way one. because because I obviously travel that road, being from the west side of Matamata. Quite a few trucks are actually driving through Scotsman's Valley that I wouldn't have thought.
I know.
I knew you'd know. That's why I thought I'd raise it just in this space, because I think that's one of the things also is data is how we use our roads, and unfortunately, an unintended consequence of this intersection at the moment is that a lot of people are choosing to use our local roads to get to Hamilton.
Yes. And yes, and the solution is an intersection and a bypass. But yeah, absolutely. I hear them thundering past. And you know, no, and I try to pull out of my driveway and think, crikey, it used to be quiet around here. So yes, there is a flow on from that. Yep.
Angela?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to follow on about Pairi. Yeah, I remember bottom of the Bombays many years ago, the road coming from Tauranga, many fatal crashes there, and the solution proposed was a flyover. And now you wouldn't think of, you know, it's just normal to have a flyover there. So I've just, when it says roundabout or flyover, in the 40-year lifespan, what sort of modelling has been done? Like, is it a budget thing, or like, how can we know that a roundabout is really the right solution
So it's always a budget
in
thing.
that space?
If you put through a forward project, you have to do a full cost benefit analysis, and that cost benefit analysis has to have all of that modelling and say, we think the traffic volumes are going to look like X. We project them to look like Y by 2040, 2060, 2100. We think from an investment point of view, there's two options. You could build a flyover or you could build a roundabout. There might be more solutions, I don't know. And the cost benefit of those in at 1 to 10 is this one's a 10 and this one's a 1 or a 3 or what. Yeah, that's the trade-off, and it is a trade-off. The key issues, the key difference, one is we are close to the Waikato River. The scale of earthworks is quite significantly different between those two options. You can imagine which one has a lot more earthworks. So there's a managing the impact of the project on the Waikato River. There's also, is it overkill in terms of if we were to build a flyover, what else won't we be able to do? And that's, to be honest, that's the trade-off. And at the moment, that roundabout, it's an enormous, it's 60 meters across. It's enormous. It's the design that allows the roundabout to become part of the traffic flow. So you actually just drive into the roundabout and you become part of the traffic flow on the roundabout, as opposed to the old stop-start. I've got to wait for somebody to go past. And all of the modelling shows that it's got well and truly a 40-year lifespan, even with the somewhat surprising increase in traffic on the expressway.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, look, in 30 years we might be going, gee, we've got a lot more traffic. It's a model's as good as a model is good, and that's what we've got to go on at the moment.
Okay. Is it possible to get eyes on the design? Just because like you say, you think of a roundabout and you think your local roundabout. So just to understand Yeah,
it's on the website.
On the website. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a really good page. There's a whole page dedicated to Cambridge to Piriti and to State Highway 129 on our, if you just go on our website and type it in, and it's got diagrams, it's got the designation, it's also got, I think now they've updated it to include the preferred options for the walking and cycling path as well. So at the moment, the preferred option for the walking and cycling path is to use the current State Highway 1 as the walking and cycling path route once the new expressway comes in place, and then have that connect at Hora, I think, down into the onto.
So what will the crossing point be then? Will it be an underpass or?
So you can literally go under this roundabout design. You can go under it. It's got a big pit in the middle of it, and it's going to have a big sculpture in it. And yeah, get on the website.
Eugene.
Thank you, Chair. Right now, maybe I should have checked the website, but just a few questions, if you don't mind, Chair. It's just they were pretty important on the last term's RTC committee in those last 12 months. So one of them that's been put to me to follow up was schools on state highways. We're talking about, lowering the speed through those schools, and where did we get to with that, David?
So the new speed rule that has come into effect requires schools on state highways to have a 60-kilometre-an-hour speed limit.
Okay.
And schools in urban areas to have a default 40-kilometre-an-hour speed limit. And there's a staged process of implementing those. So the speed limit's a done deal. The implementation is staged, and partly that's because it also requires some other speed limit changes, because and I'll pick on Whanuakiri, for example, it goes from 100 to 80, and then there's a school. And so staging the change in speed to allow you to be 40 kilometres an hour or 60 kilometres an hour means there's quite a few changes required. It also includes Kuta, doesn't include marae, but we are currently doing a whole lot of work with marae around the country around what appropriate speed limits look like. We've done it with, I think there's about 14 or 15 marae, including the marae at State Highway 27 as you go into Matamata, that we've included in the speed review program, because they were the ones we were really conscious of, that are slightly larger. They've got more than just a marae happening. They've got a health centre. They've got a kuta kaupapa. They've got, those sort of things. So, yeah, that's a done deal. It's just implementation.
Implementation. So maybe what, six months?
I can't tell you. I should say, go to the website. I can't tell you, but I will come back to you with
thank you.
Proper answer.
Couple more. So the other one is around TMP's traffic management. Might be wrong here, but I think Waka Kotahi was doing some work around that, and traffic managers plan. So obviously our alliance groups or our roading teams refer to those TMPs. Is it called
yes,
or something like that?
Yep.
So just where that's at, we're just noticing in our communities, when there's community events on that are trying to have to run under those same systems, that either communities are pulling out of having events because it's just too time consuming and costly, when sometimes it's actually just very common sense, logical stuff in local areas. So just wondering what work's happening with that to be able to improve that.
So the standards have just literally 4 months ago been updated, and they do make it easier to put through a TMP. That it's a simpler process. It doesn't make the actual implementation of that traffic management plan any cheaper. So we don't run that, right? There are companies that go, we'll do your implementation for you and we'll charge you whatever we'll charge you. And I know I've been approached by the St. Stephen's for the Tamahiri markets, for example, to say, look, more than half of what we make goes to our traffic management. And unfortunately, that's not something we can control.
It's sort of a little bit like tail wagging the dog with in that situation with
and that's a
traffic
tough
management
situation.
companies sort of helping construct some of that and then selling their services. So
yeah, they haven't had. I mean, we're pretty deliberate about making sure that there isn't any sort of pecuniary interest or what have you in making it really expensive to have a traffic management plan. It's really strongly safety driven, but that safety, that sort of zero tolerance for risk comes at a cost. And for some sites it's more than others. The St. Stephen's one, you're right, under an underpass, off an expressway, on 2 state highways. It's a complicated environment, unfortunately.
It's just interesting because I know, and nobody disagrees with the safety aspect of it. It's just that you start to see communities losing some of that, those events and that, because it just becomes too costly. It's easier to just walk away from it. So it does have a breakdown in your communities as well. Just lastly, the Whara roundabout, I know we're doing, and it's funded for the design phase and all of that. Where is it still sitting? And I know there's a lot of other issues on the table, David, so.
So it was
um,
a probable,
yeah.
which means that it, at this stage is that design phase will get done.
Yeah.
Implementation will then have to go through into the RLT.
Cheers, thank you.
Thanks, Eugene.
Thank you.
Any other questions for David? Call your twin brother's name again. If none, I'd like to move. Oh, yep, sorry, Oliver.
Hi, David. I just wanted to ask about the driver's license programming. I've seen here that you're targeting people with this. I'm just wondering if you could give me more information about those.
Yep. So, Jordan, we haven't met before, but I can't off the top of my head, but I will. Maybe we can talk afterwards, and I can get you whatever you need. I can get the driver's license folks come and have a chat with you. Yeah.
Sorry, David, I should have introduced Oliver, but I haven't been introduced myself, but he's our, Angela, is it mobility, disability sector representative? So yeah, sorry, Oliver, I didn't introduce you to everyone right at the beginning. Any other questions for David? Okay, I'd like to move the resolution that a report of Waka, Kotahi, New Zealand Transport Agency be received. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Eugene, and a seconder. Thanks, Bill. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, and in the interest of time, we're going to move item number 11 and 12 together. So I'd like to welcome Wendy to the front. Is it? Wendy and Trudy. Yep. Hi, Trudy. For the regional public transport performance monitoring and also the regional public transport planning. We did have a report omitted out of the agenda that has been tabled. So both of these reports will be received and not, well, thank you, Mayor Lynn, if you can leave. Right, welcome, Wendy. Turn your mic on.
Yeah, just again, in the interest of time, committee members, we thought we might take this one as read. Particularly, we know we had the public forum at the start, which related to some matters relevant to these items as well. So this is the opportunity to follow through with staff on any questions that you might have in relation to, the matters that arose through the public forum as it related to those public transport services. So with that, we'll probably skip the introduction, other than perhaps Trudy, if you could introduce yourself. And the reason I'll do that is when we brought the committee together before the first RTC meeting, Trudy was busy managing some issues over at the Transport Centre that you were aware of at the time. So she wasn't here to introduce herself. So Trudy, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, and then we'll go straight into questions from the committee on the agenda reports.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, there were a number of issues going on across the road last time everyone met here, but no, my name's Trudy Knight. I'm PT Manager for Waikato Regional Council. My sort of role and responsibility is to focus on the operational aspects of the services, ensuring that there is a good level of reliability or service reliability, as well as all aspects that are end-to-end for that customer experience piece. So I have a team of operational staff as well as marketing and comms staff members, and we reside at the Transport Centre. We run a busset counter, which is serviced by a number of my staff, Monday to Friday. So pleasure to meet you all. Thank you.
Okay, as Mark said, we'll take it that the reports have been read. Is there any questions for Wendy or Trudy? Yes, Angela.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. I don't actually have any questions on the second report, so just this one. In terms of the patronage for the Airport Flex trial service. That was a 12-month trial service. First quick question would be, is the rest of Flex in the CBD going okay? You're happy with their numbers?
That's pretty average as well.
Is
I
it?
think the airport was a standout,
Okay.
yeah, poor performer. Yeah, and I guess it depends on what the goals of it in that are in terms of cost per passenger. The night rider service even then is high.
So, when will you be bringing, when does the trial end?
For the night rider, from what I understand, it will go to the end of the funding period.
So it's fine, we aligned it with the financial year.
From what I understand, yes.
Yeah.
But potentially it will come to, I guess, put some information about the airport one on this one. Potentially it will come back for the next round
Yes.
to look at, is that a priority in terms of.
So I was
service
going to
delivery.
ask, not potentially, but can it be put onto the agenda for the next one so that we, so that? Oh, is this going to the future proof one, is it? Will it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, just on that point, and for the benefit of committee members who are from whose councils are not within the Future Proof sub-region, just last week, the Future Proof Implementation Committee, which is the head committee for the Future Proof Partnership, resolved to establish a public transport subcommittee. You might some of you may remember previously the Regional Council had a dedicated public transport committee chaired by Councillor Strange, who cycled between a regional focus and an urban focused committee cycle. In the regional focused version of that committee, it was mostly the same people that were sitting around the Regional Transport Committee table. And so that was part of the reason why this time we are having public transport on the Regional Transport Committee agenda, and as it relates to the wider region, those detailed matters that relate to trials, route changes and other things that require these minor changes to the regional public transport plan or service delivery in the urban environment will come back through that subcommittee.
Okay.
But that subcommittee is still in the process of forming, which
Yeah.
is why you've got that in front of you on this agenda as well.
Okay, I won't take up any committee time then with questions. I'll wait because I'll be appointed onto that one. So just the in terms of the public forum submissions that you heard this morning, what are the what thoughts have you got to, or if any, to resolve? And I'm interested in the representation, the representatives for the parents in terms of that timing.
So I guess probably looking for some direction from the committee on that one. There is, it's not just the areas that were presented this morning, there's also Cambridge and even Urban Hamilton, Fairfield Intermediate, and that taking a lot of Ratatuna kids.
Yeah.
When we look at it, these are peak trips. So to run an additional bus out to Cambridge and that, it's a peak trip, and our whole fleet is based on how many buses do we require in the peak. So if we do want to run another bus out to Matamata or out to Cambridge or whatever, the only reason that, well, the only way that we could do it potentially is to buy additional buses, and they're 600-700 grand each. And I guess that would impact the whole total cost. We don't have any use for those buses outside of that period. The interpeak's always a difficult period, even with what we've currently got.
Okay. So I guess this can be an option that will go to the new subcommittee as well. Well, that's why this whole report is here, or is it slightly different?
Yes, through the chair, as it relates to the Hamilton and surrounds, yes. But I think it will also be something of a conversation that happens around this committee, because there is that slightly higher order principled question as it relates to the extent to which a public authority has responsibility to pick up the cost of parents' decisions to send their children out of zone. Because it'll be important that we adopt a consistent approach to that region-wide. When we then zoom down to the specific services and routes, then we'll direct that to the appropriate committee.
Okay, so I guess I'd indicate, and it may not be that a motion is needed, that I mean, I think we need more information about actually patronage and also those other routes as well. So if staff can take an action, that they will bring that back to the next meeting for consideration. If you need me to move a motion, then I would be happy to do that, but equally happy if you just say, yep, we'll do that.
Happy to take that as an action, and we'll include it as a matter to highlight in the next public transport performance report.
I think also onto that, what I'd like to see is just not so much if it's going to be an extra bus, but also that patronage from 1 o'clock, and what will be the effect if that was taken away and then put on that 3 o'clock, or can it be, with the rest of the network that 1 o'clock bus runs on? Is it just straight out there and straight back? So yeah, all that kind of information, if we could just have that.
Typically, yeah, we could run a whole lot of additional services at 3 o'clock. You just hit that peak, you hit the opportunity cost of, your maximum number of vehicles that you've got. The other thing that would be helpful to have some guidance around is a lot of the parents' comments around that it's not safe for my kid to wait for the second bus. So I guess not only the cost from what Mark said around, is it our responsibility to provide the transport, is the safety perspective our responsibility. And probably the other thing just to consider, we have, there's always this March Madness, and it's getting kids home at the end of the day when, before the school sports and everything starts. Operations have run some additional trips out to Cambridge or at least Hamahere to help out with that short term, because it typically will sort itself out. Going forward, and the only reason that they've been able to do that is because we've got these buses that, with the driver shortage, we haven't got the Comet and Meteor up and running is what we'd like yet. But in a normal environment, we would not have spare buses to be able to do that. So I guess we need a deliberate strategy for next year, because we won't have that flexibility in terms of the ad hoc that we have had this year.
Okay, Councillor Strange.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, probably adding to that as well, I'd like to hear from MOE what their view is on this issue, because I'm sure it's not just isolated to our region. And then also on the balance of that, we either have kids on buses or we've got parents driving. So yeah, some data on what, parents have a right to choose where they send their kids. So data around, increasing car trips as opposed to one bus. And just on a separate matter, the Waikato District trials, just wanted to say, to Waikato District, thank you and congratulations on partnering with AT. That's a really good outcome. Looking at your Pocono to Papakura bus, and your council taking the initiative to, despite lack of funding from Waka Kotahi, running some trials just to see where that demand is and serving your whole community. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And that was probably all. Thank you.
Chair, I think just raising the issue, obviously with the Matamata College, obviously it's my turf. We need to actually consider what our philosophical view is of the strategy of this option that we're providing. I agree that MOE need to be included because you've got a growing city and then you're bringing kids in from the rural areas to the city. Now, I'm one of those kids that grew up out of Otrahonga, and I actually went to school here and I was a boarder. So my parents made a choice. They didn't put me on a public bus every day. And I think that's one of the things that we have to understand. With regards to Morrinsville College, just to give you a bit of history, obviously going to school here, I was actually at school with kids over 40 years ago that travelled from Morrinsville on the old blue buses. So that's a historic situation. We've created a new situation in Matamata by providing this bus. So I guess it comes down to our philosophical view of what we're actually providing here. And I just really look forward to that, having a real balanced conversation around that, because if you've got growing cities, your schools can't get any bigger, surely, by bringing in more kids from the rural zones. But anyway, that's just my view.
Probably going to echo your comments, but a generation forward. So we in the same position and we sent our kids out of town, and it's about choice. But I'd be interested in what principles we're going to put on the table to help make our decisions. We paid and had a private bus from Taupo to Cambridge. Many, many years for all the kids I've got, there's a few. And it wasn't cheap. But I agree with Angela, this is around choice. I don't accept the comments from, we heard on the screen. I buttoned my lip when I was speaking, but I reacted somewhat negatively to that. I do sympathise with the parents, but I'm not actually that sympathetic to extending that we should pay for it. But I'd be interested to know, if we're going to debate on a principled level, let's identify clearly what those principles are and which side of that debate we're going to fall on. So yeah, probably similar to your comments.
Yeah, through the chair, kia ora koutou. Yeah, Mike Pettit, Claire's had to leave for an appointment. Yeah, I'd just like to make comment on, I'd just like to support the two Angels really. One, that this should be deferred. We couldn't hear from one of the principals there. I'll declare a bit of an interest here. I am a principal myself, as well as a councillor. So I heard the speakers speak this morning at the public forum, and my suggestion would be it was very much oversimplified around the reasons. German and a special character school. There are many reasons why children are put on buses by their parents, and one of those is white flight. And there's lots of other reasons too. So I think the committee probably needs to hear all the reasons why these parents are putting these kids on their bus and whether we should pay that. And it comes down to, I think you've said over here, morally, where we sit on some of the reasons kids get on buses, because it's reasonably complicated. It's not just a couple of things. And this committee, I think, needs to be a bit more aware of some of the reasons. So I'd quite like to hear Scott at the next meeting. Maybe he needs to front to answer some questions because we couldn't actually hear him.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? Yeah, David?
Just, if we're going to do that, can I suggest that we invite Marcus Frick, who's the Regional Director from Ministry for Education, because I don't believe for a second this is about buses. This is about school zoning and choice. And I mean, I send my kids from Tauwhare into Boys High. They don't go to Hillcrest. They don't go to Cambridge High. They go to Boys High because I want them to go to a boys' school, and they're a whole bunch of other reasons. I drive every day. In fact, I drive a 7-seater full of sweaty boys because there's heaps of them locally. The bus service doesn't provide that. And we suck it up. That's our choice. If that zoning changed and we had to see, we didn't have that option, well, so be it. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of other reasons here that I think are not about public transport.
Angela?
Yeah, sorry, just on another item. On page 59, we have the total mobility, which has become regionalised. So I was just wondering through the chair if Ollie, you might like to comment on total mobility and what that means to people in our communities.
Yeah. Thanks, Angela. Yeah, so I'm really, really happy to see that this has been funded regionally. Yeah, it's going to make an absolutely enormous difference to disabled people, especially people who are living in, smaller towns. So previously it's been quite sort of fragmented, depending on which region you live in, as to the subsidy that you'd get. So fantastic to see that now the subsidy is $50 per trip region wide. So as far as what that will mean for disabled people, I had a phone call from a lady the other week who lives in, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but I'm new. I think she lives in Patereru, and her nearest big town was Tokoroa. I think that's right. And so for her to get from Patereru to Tokoroa was prohibitively expensive, and so it was the only sort of the closest place she could do her shopping and do what she needed to every week. So the increased funding is going to allow people to access the community a lot more, to get out more, be part of things. So just want to say thank you for that. It's going to make a huge difference to the lives of lots of people.
Thank you, Oliver. Eugene.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a comment really. Thanks, Oliver, for giving us that information. But just acknowledge Regional Council for making that decision to take that service region wide. Waikato District Council jumped on with that service 18 months, 2 years ago, and trying to roll it out throughout the district, and it's been a little bit tricky in places, but it is a fantastic service that actually be able to connect people with disabilities to get onto the mainstream transport routes and move them around the district well. So well done to Regional for making that call. Thank you.
Thanks, Eugene. Time is running on, so if there's no more questions for Wendy and Trudy, I'd like to just have the network planning update report, both actually item 11 and 12 be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Angela. Moved, and a seconder. Thanks, Andrea. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, the last item of the day. We'll welcome back David's twin brother, Nigel. Item number 13. So road safety monitor report. And we've got Jenny online. Thank you, Nigel.
Kia ora anō committee. Thank you. I will just take the report as read, highlight a couple of the key stats and items of work that we are focused on in road safety. Just by way of information, this will be a regular report that we'll bring back to the committee at each meeting. We'll continue to update you on stats and how we're progressing in various safety initiatives. We do believe very strongly in the road to zero vision for zero deaths and serious injuries, so that no one is killed or seriously injured on our roads. And we continue to work towards that. We are supported as a committee with the Regional Road Safety Forum. They will convene for the first time this triennium on the 30th of March, and they will discuss some of the contemporary road safety issues, and they're also the forum by which we enact or deliver on the actions inside of Road to Zero for the Waikato 2020, which is our road safety strategy. We continue to work tirelessly. Well, I say we. I'm taking a lot of credit there for the work of my great team. But areas of work we have heard today through Waka Kotahi, there's driver licensing improvements. We've been supporting a lot of that work, most recently, as I understand, in the Waipa area, and focused on that. We continue to collaborate with Students Against Dangerous Driving. You'll note the billboards that are out in our region, which are currently displaying our summer road safety tips. We've also continued to collaborate with other partners such as ACC on motorcycle rider coaching. We have a very active Reduce the Risk website, which is getting good exposure in social media. We also focus strongly on alcohol impairment educations and the Right Track program to support recidivists impaired and dangerous driving, drivers who have been recidivists for impairment or dangerous driving. We continue to focus on cycle safety across the Waikato, which is often delivered at a local or regional level, and we do continue to focus very strongly on our high-profile young road user program with Ruben the Bear. the Road Safety Bureau, I should say. Just a correction to some of the statistics that were noted in the report. Sadly, the number goes up. It was across New Zealand that 380 people died last year, of which 73 were in our district. So we do have a significant issue here in the Waikato that we'll continue to address. That stats that you see there in paragraph 28 show our year to date. You'll note that based on the timing of when that data comes through, it's about a month behind. I just checked the Ministry of Transport website information recently. Again, sadly, numbers go up, not down for us. We've had 65 deaths across the country in the year to date, 12 of which have been located in Waikato. That's likely to be updated. Additionally, the appendices of this report continue to show the deaths and hospitalisations of people here in Waikato and nationally. That's a new addition to this report that we haven't had previously. So it will be updated as this report is brought back to the committee. And finally, we also have the rolling data that's derived from the crash analysis system, which shows the location and cause in some instances of sadly the fatalities that we have across our region. I'll leave it there, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Nigel and the report? Philip.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, Nigel, something that struck me the last term that I was on the Elections Committee was the number of middle-aged motorcycle men, mainly, that are dying on our roads. And I noticed in this report of the 9 in the Waikato, 2 of them fit that criteria. Is there any data that highlights whether these motorcyclists, they get to middle age and they decide they want to ride a motorbike, so that they just haven't got that experience, and versus whether they've been riding all their lives? Is that a key factor in it?
That is very interesting. I don't have data immediately to hand on that, but it is a noted phenomenon where middle-aged riders, so people who have been away from riding for a long period of time, find themselves coming back to riding, but now suddenly, well, or due to circumstances in their lives, find themselves being able to afford much more powerful, better bikes than what they had when they were originally learning to ride. But coming with that, they don't necessarily have had trained the same level of reflex that they might have had if they had continued riding. So I don't actually have data for you to show you the difference between riders who have continued to ride versus who have come back to it. One of the areas of work that we do really appreciate, though, is this Ride Forever course that we collaborate with ACC on, and that does show very, very good reductions in the statistics for the riders who have completed that course are far less likely to be involved in an accident than riders who have not, holding everything else constant. So it does show the benefit of additional education in terms of coming back to an activity that you might have enjoyed but been away from for a while. It helps to definitely brush up those skills and come back more safely in it. So, but I will take it on advice to see if I can find something, the difference between riders in a continuous who have ridden continuously versus those who have come back to it.
Yeah, and just something to really encourage to.
Yeah, very definitely. Please plug that for anyone. It's very useful.
I think I'm one of your statistics, Philip, but got back riding. But I appreciate the ad campaign that was on TV, kind of, for the riders. That was really, really good, for me coming back on the riding. So I think that kind of information that's out there, and also the hand-in-hand collaboration with doing courses for guys that are coming back on are huge. So yeah, just to let you know that ad on TV, really for someone that came back into a motorbike scene, and a big one, in Indian. So yeah, it was good. Okay. Sorry. Yep. Angela.
Again,
Sorry.
Chair. Just on well, on page 65 of diligent, but on the on the financial costs of road crashes, and this has always been an area of constant frustration for me. I've been given figures of 11 million, 14 million, all sorts. So this is saying an average social cost per fatal crash is 5.8 million. What's social mean?
Again, I probably can't answer this as accurately as one of my staff might, but as I understand this, this is the total cost to society of that fatality. So this not only takes account of the direct costs associated with that, so that might be medical intervention, emergency response, and other. This also takes account of the fact that that is person who's died is no longer a contributing member to society. So they may well have had additional, so this could be potentially lifetime loss of earnings or direct contribution to society. That's my understanding of how the social cost is derived, but I could be wrong on that one, but I'm happy to come back and bring you what those factors are.
Yeah, I would really like that because I don't know where I've heard 11 and 12 and 14 million over the years.
I'll come back to you on that one. So I'd hate to put you wrong. So I'll find out how they're derived.
Because just that alone is over $400 million just for our region based on 73 deaths last.
Even just at that $5 million.
That's not the serious injury or
minor
injury.
There's a lot, and this shows the impact of injuries on our region.
Yeah, and just to be really crystal clear on that information, because it's, as a politician, we're often telling people to slow down and we're doing, spending all this money, and people go, oh, well, it's only a few hundred deaths a year. And what about those drug and alcohol and all of that stuff? But I've often gone back and said it's millions of dollars involved just from one fatality on our roads, let alone the family impact. So yeah, and I have quoted many times 11, 12, 14 million dollars because I have actually seen that somewhere.
I'll find you the specific figures.
That'd be super helpful. Thanks.
I did see Councillor Taylor might have had additional
Yeah,
information.
Okay, Kevin and then David, or do you want David to go first, Kevin?
No, I'm actually looking past David, looking at Glenn. I'm thinking of a lifetime ago. It used, when I started doing this, it was about 3.5 million, and the social cost, you're right, Nigel, it is all of those things, lost earning potential and so on and so on and so on, but it's aggregated over all of that. And I guess the pushback I have used in the past where people say, oh, it's only a small amount of whatever it is, or it's only X number of people, is give me a list of names of your family members you would like on that list and start there and see what the reaction is. And most people would back right away from saying, oh, it's only whatever, because it's not. And I'm also with Michael, though I probably never stopped riding motorbikes, but it is a significant issue. And you're right, the research came out of Victoria, where they noticed, we're going back probably 15 or more years, where they noticed an uptick in the number of people, middle-aged men primarily, who came back to motorcycling, and unfortunately, it's LAMS approved motorbikes now are more powerful than the fastest thing you could buy in the 1960s and 70s. So it's what it is.
Yeah, so Nigel will come back with those stats, and obviously our guys hold those. They are from ACC amongst other things. The deaths are cheaper than the serious injuries. It's the serious injuries that drive it up, and in our region, it's $1.4 billion a year. It's scary numbers. So yeah, and I did the opposite, and I quit riding before I killed myself. Hopefully, I won't be one of those stats.
Mike, would you like to? Unahia mai te uru tapanui, kia wātia,
Quiet, please. Excuse me, we're just doing the karakia.
kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te hiningaro, I te ara takatū. Koe rā I rongo, I whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Could you just take your belongings out, because we've got another meeting at 1:30, and you're quite welcome. There's lunch served in the room next door.